A very good evening, all. We have gathered for yet another interesting Ecotech talk of Exneco today, and we have with us Mr. Bharat Kumar Sridharan, researcher in the area of technology, sustainability, and strategy. Our topic for the day is sustainability and ESG from research and development perspective. We will be talking about sustainability and ESG from a research perspective in today's sustainability consultancy and advisory series. Mr. Sridharan has more than half a decade of experience in the technology and research and development sector and has worked with major companies like Bosch, Airbus, Siemens in the past. Presently, he is pursuing his research in the area of technology from the prestigious Wharton University and has done his Masters of Science from Delft University of Technology, Netherlands. We at Exneco are proud to have him for our Ecotech Talk. Exneco stands for Exploration, Networking, and Collaboration, and we are trying to build a platform for sustainable enterprises for the common good. Myself, Shrestha, and I'm the host for the day. Welcome, Mr. Sridharan, for today's Ecotech Talk. My first question to you is, how crucial is the role of research and development in the field of sustainability and ESG, and how it will impact the organization's growth?
Okay, thanks a lot for the introduction, Shrestha. Regarding this one, first of all, I'm really happy to be a part of the Tech Talk today. I think it's a great opportunity also for me to actually share a few of my perspectives with you. And yeah, with regards to getting straight to the topic. So speaking of R&D, first of all, let me just say one thing that we actually live more in a globalized world, wherein most of the tech companies they are in a state of constant competition. So and it's like we are in the information age, not the industrial age, which makes it that uh, technologies especially have to be literally state of the art. Be it like just the product or the service or whatever offering an organization has, it has to be state of the art to stay alive in the market. So from this perspective, R&D becomes very important. And just to give an example, if you look at Japan, for example, one of the reasons the Made in Japan tag name has such a big brand value, the reason for that is because they're into continuous improvement, which is one of the important features of their R&D. But now coming to sustainability and R&D and ESG, when we are actually talking or factoring in these together, the problem or the challenge that often firms face is that why should I do an R&D in sustainability? Because first of all, R&D by itself is like very capital intensive. So what's in it for me to do an R&D in sustainability? But actually, what firms have to understand in terms of implications is that, despite the fact that in India there are no legal, like say, legislations which actually say that you actually have to do so and so thing because, for example, EU or US, it's like they have been having a lot of legislations which actually mandate certain things when it comes to meeting sustainability standards, but that's not there here. But despite the fact, one thing which is definitely there in this country is that we are a brand conscious country. That's something which we should take at face value. So in that aspect, despite the fact that ESG or sustainability in the R&D becomes a capital intensive thing, but in the long term, it can impact firms positively in the form of, like say, added brand value. So that's something which is a niche which can be tapped, especially when we actually talk about firms and there's a lot of competition amongst them. So in this competition, for them to sustain, they need a branding advantage, and for that, why not sustainability? And also talking about like the resources which we have in India, or the talent or the expertise, I think that's definitely in parallel because we all know that there have been Indians who've been working abroad and they've been performing or performing really high in major organizations. So which means that we have the potential, and in order to compete in the global market, why is it that we can't just factor sustainability or ESG inside the firm's like say products or services? So that's something which could actually also like factoring in the R&D, despite the fact that there can be capital or like losses in the beginning, but in the long term, it can, or a firm can position itself competitively in the global landscape as well. in par with, say, Japan or Europe or US. So that's my take on it.
Okay. So, like, what is your viewpoint from this stakeholder perspective when it comes to sustainability?
So, from stakeholder perspective, definitely when we talk about sustainability, there would be multiple viewpoints on this actually. So, for instance, certain stakeholder groups, like if you look at for a firm, especially for a product-based firm, the stakeholders would be enormous because they have like a whole product life cycle to cover. That starts right from the R&D to the production to the supply chain networks, and it goes on till the marketing or even disposal. But when you talk about service or advisory or consulting firms, there what happens is that what they have to do at the end of the day is like, they just have an offering. And when we talk about sustainability in this regards, the maximum thing they'll have to do is like saving like energy efficiency or like the inbound and the outbound logistics and how the employees travel and reach. Are they like using sustainable means, waste disposal? This is exactly the scope within which they can operate. But for a product firm, it becomes all the more complicated because when you're actually developing something, especially if it's not software and if it's hardware based, at that point of time, it so happens that you'll have to manufacture something or give some kind of an output, also have a supplier network, and will the suppliers agree with it or not? So these are a few things which actually need to be taken under consideration. But again, when we speak about materiality or materiality assessments, in which you also have an opportunity to involve stakeholders in the decision making process within the R&D. So the first step in this regards would be that it's like always get the stakeholders on board and see to it that where exactly they stand. So this actually depends on which country you operate in as well. Because like say for in India, there has been like a consciousness, especially in the energy sector. If you see, a lot of them are investing in there are a lot of solar projects going on, for example, e-vehicles also picking up. So there are certain groups which might be interested. So it's always good to first actually try to piston within your stakeholder network and find out as to where exactly you stand with respect to your stakeholders, and also give them the confidence that if the branding part which I mentioned. So if they are convinced that in the long term it is going to give them returns, then of course when you actually have a long term pitch in place and you have a long term proposal in place, then in that case it becomes obvious that you might be able to actually even transition those stakeholders who might probably or be associated more with the status quo to just say that it's like in the long term we can actually make this happen. So that would be my take on from the stakeholder perspective as to how we see it.
Wonderful. So now, how can enterprise connect with SDG at the research and development level?
Okay, so when we talk about SDG and this one or enterprises as such. So SDGs, what happens with SDGs? SDGs more a framework. So the framework is something like it says that there are a total of 17 goals, which is actually categorized into various aspects, and they say, I mean, it's like in that aspect you see that SDGs would just be like a framework. So they don't have absolute standards specified as to how exactly it could actually, what exactly are the things or what exactly are the steps or how exactly you're supposed to assess yourself. So in that aspect, SDG does not really play a very important role in actually helping you advance forward. But what the SDGs can definitely do is they can help you evaluate the firm as to whatever offering you're making and whatever activities that are happening. So if you look at what exactly are the activities that my employees like say are doing on a regular basis, what kind of activities different stakeholder groups are doing on a regular basis, and try to find out and map it to the various SDG goals and see as to where exactly do I stand. So it's it's more of an estimation and not something to be taken at face value. And like for example, I can give you like a very small example in this that the waste segregation thing. So it's for instance, it's like waste segregation nowadays. I mean, it's done in almost like in all the like metropolis and all those places. There's a lot of environmental consciousness and there is proper waste segregation. So that's one of the aspects of the SDG goals as well. So inside your firms, how are employees doing it? Are they able to actually maintain waste segregation properly? And when they're walking in and walking out at that point of time, how exactly it's how exactly are they using operating So these are a few things which actually, it's like, even for service firms, these things would definitely play a role and make a difference to evaluate yourself. And as I said before, the energy consumption part, so that plays again a major role in how exactly you're actually operating and what exactly. I mean, energy sources, of course, you cannot find out as to how exactly, where exactly you're getting it, and you can't guarantee that everything is coming from a renewable source. But still, at least you can find out as to how exactly your energy spending, or like how exactly you're using your energy, and if it's actually like, are you overusing it, underusing it. And so these are a few factors you can actually try to factor in all those things together within the boundaries of your firm and see where exactly you stand. And based on that, you can actually make some calculated moves, or at least try to create some kind of awareness or a pulse. I mean, just see as to where exactly you stand with regards to this, and if there's something that can be improved. Because long term improvements, when you talk about, you just can't have a solar panel installed right above your roof in a jiffy, because it takes some time in order to inculcate any kind of change with regards to sustainability. So that's something which firms will have to be a bit wary of, to know exactly where they stand in this regards.
Okay, so that's really good. So it is a slow process, but yes, a lot of mapping has to be done, and one has to see where one stands and how they can align with SDGs. That was a really good input. So now we move on to the next question. What are the major differences you come across in dealing and accepting ESG and sustainability compared to Indian and global market?
Okay, so what I would definitely say in this regard is, in the global market, especially. So wherein, like, let's talk about more of the developed nations, we can so to speak. So what happens there is, like, one thing I've definitely seen is the legislation part. When, like, there are certain legislations which actually you're supposed to follow. Of course, like, it's not that everyone does follow it, or like, you can't enforce it, but definitely they are actually transitioning to it. So that's something wherein you see an active part on the side of the government, wherein they actually try to say that, for example, France came up with a recent legislation, or there are rumors that it's going to happen, that they're going to ban thermocol for packaging. So because of that, there has been a lot of stress amongst firms as to how exactly will we do this, because packaging at the end of the day is like, making no firm actually really cares a lot or invests a lot in seeing as to how the packaging is going about. So it's like, if you're saying that no thermocol, then in that case it becomes a lot of stress for firms, like, what is the other source, and we don't have the expertise to do, because we have a different offering altogether. So how can we start an investigation and find out what could be a substitute for thermocol? So this is one example wherein the government actually tries to intervene and say that this is exactly what you want. But one more thing in this regard as to why such an intervention is possible is because of different stakeholder groups again. Because first of all, people are environmentally a bit conscious, and one thing is that even political parties, when they compete with each other, one of the things which they definitely have in their agenda is what exactly is the stand on sustainability and environment. So that's one thing which you can actually, it's very clearly visible in all, like, marketing slogans of all political parties. So there is one advantage that, when actually a political party, before it gets elected, they say that, this is something in our agenda. So it also makes it very clear that if they're going to implement anything, it is going to be well received publicly. So at the end of the day, it's like, the government is also like, they don't fear a backlash, thinking that what will happen if I just, try to, like, just make a radical change in these aspects, because they know that they are going to receive public support. First of all, given the fact that also that, people are also a bit environmentally conscious in that regards. And also, like, if you see, there, it's like, for instance, in a lot of countries, like, e-vehicles have already started, and you find charging stations like at every station here and there. So which basically means that, when people have already started taking an interest, it becomes very easy to actually have some kind of a legislation in place, and that also makes it competitive for firms. Because when people actually start demanding for sustainability, then firms have no other option other than to invest in it, which means that shareholders have to start investing in it, because that's exactly how they can position themselves in the market. But when it comes to, like, the Indian market, the thing is, like, we are actually moving more towards sustainability, where we're developing at a rapid pace. No one can deny that. In this regards, for example, like, we have this new solar alliance now, and we're heading it. So that's a good initiative definitely to start with. But with regards to legislations, there are no hard and fast rules concerning, like, ESG or sustainability that has to be, like, that has to be done, or should be done. So in this regards, the only tangible advantage which anyone could see over here is that you can. There are a lot of industries, and there is definitely competition. So the only advantage you get out of it is the branding part of it. So that's the difference I would say between like what I see here and what I see there, because the involvement of the legislation. I mean, legislative involvement, and of course, it's also like practically not possible at this moment because we have different priorities to look into, and we have other like needs which also require a lot of attention. So it might not be a priority, but in the years to come, and even from like looking at how the transition is, it's transitioning rapidly, like compared to 5 years. And if I compare it, like 5 years back I was in Bangalore, and again I'm back here after 5 years, and now when I see the difference, I could see that there's been a lot of change. For example, waste segregation first was it was not taken very seriously, but now I see that it's being it's like people have been doing it very actively. And some other differences, so to speak, is also regarding renewable energy. A lot of states have actually actively invested in renewable energy. We have like solar, like I think one of the largest solar parks in Rajasthan. So these are a few things which actually are taking up a shape. But of course, like but if you compare it with like say more of the established nations, then it might be a bit of a time-consuming process. But the change is visible. But yes, like once it's like the motion is set, and when it becomes acceptable to like different stakeholder groups, because we're also a huge country. So once I think that gets accepted, then there might be an active involvement also from the side of like say like say legislation. They can also be assured that people are quite well aware. So it's time for us to actually start mandating a few things here and there. So that's exactly how I look at the differences between like an Indian context and say a global context.
So yes, so India is also catching up. We can see that. So now moving to the next question, what is your take on ESG reporting and the benefits arising out of the same?
Okay. So when it comes to ESG reporting, the benefits which I definitely see is that especially if you look at like say we have certain well-established industries here, especially if you look at it just in Bangalore, the IT industry is like already very established, and Bangalore is like, for example, known as the Silicon Valley of India, you can call it. And in fact, most people abroad, they are also aware of like what kind of potential the place has and what exactly are the offerings it has. So in this case, when you're actually competing or when you're prepared for competition, set for competition in the global landscape, like when your products or services are being acknowledged globally, so what you'll have to do is like in order to stay uh, competitive enough, especially when you're tapping the international market, one thing you'll definitely need is some kind of a brand positioning, because when it comes to cost effectiveness, we already have that, because we can actually do things at a we can do things much economically compared to like say like some other country which is like probably uh, wherein there are industries, but then probably they don't have like the proper resource requirement. So when we actually are in this kind of a situation, so when you do something like an ESG reporting, and when you actually make yourself like because ESG is something like it's seen as a premium nowadays. So when you actually are investing and reporting your ESG, and you're just showing yourself and marketing yourself that way, the first thing is you actually contribute to climate. I mean, you actually are taking an active step towards climate change, and the effect is obviously it's really something which is the need of the hour. That's one thing. And the second thing is about the kind of reputation or the kind of image you give out in the international market, that you are exactly are in competition on the same level or even in par with the other counterparts. So they're exactly, and you also have like a like say a better proposition in terms of cost. So if you look at like if you look at more from the perspective of a technology battle, or like just like say a battle for products or services, there you have an upper hand naturally. And you can say that what are your offering is in a way it's in par with what other countries are able to offer. So ESG reporting in that way actually gives you this kind of a benefit, wherein it's not just about the environment, but it's also about how you position and what kind of reputation you have. I mean, what kind of vibe you're creating, especially, and what kind of presence you're establishing in the market, and that too, I'm speaking of this internationally. So that's one thing which I think ESG reporting can definitely uh, be of help.
That's really good. So, what role does materiality play in the context of ESG for modern enterprises?
Yeah. So when I speak of the materiality assessments, so what happens is one of the major factors which for the features of materiality assessments is that it involves various stakeholder groups. And when we talk about India, especially, we can actually have different kinds of. I mean, we are a very populated country, 1.4 billion. So, and if we are the purchasing power. No, no, I'll not say purchasing power, but of course, we have a very good customer base. That's also a thing. So, which means that there are going to be diverse opinions and diverse stakeholder groups. So what materiality assessment does is before you actually start doing anything or implementing any kind of an ESG change or sustainability change, you actually try to have these stakeholder opinions into your business model, or your or like whatever change you actually wish to do. It could be at technology level, it could be at systems level, or it could even be at the firm level. So there it's like you're trying to have different stakeholder groups and trying to figure out what exactly the impact would be. So this in a way gives you before you actually start implementing anything, it actually gives you as to where exactly you stand with regards to what exactly you would be offering or what exactly you would be changing, because you actually get to know what exactly would they be thinking, or what would be their perspective or stand regarding this, and how exactly would they react in this kind of situation. So this is some kind of an advantage which materiality assessment would give you, and especially in India, wherein the diversity level is really on the higher side. Because one group, for example, shareholders might not be that interested in sustainability ventures, because for them it's like it's as you say, it's like it's shelling out money from their pocket. But then at the same time, it's like let's say like you have like innovators or early adopters, or like young student groups who might actually say that we actually have been exploring or experimenting quite a lot, and we see that quite a lot of sustainability oriented things are going on, and we expect something uh, in par, or like there are just like there are like really innovative minds. So for them, this might be of interest. So if you look at in those angles, you can actually find out as to which stakeholder groups you can actually start to factoring in your business model or in the proposition you're making. And based on that, you can actually say as to at what pace you can do, or whether it is possible for you to negotiate or take someone on your side, or it gives you some kind of
You
reaction
can
time to
prioritize as
speak with.
well. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
So that's something which is one of the important things about like the materiality assessments in the context of this country, especially.
That's nice. So, how do you look at the interrelation between SDG and ESG? Are they the two sides of the same coin?
Actually, no. SDG and ESG, I wouldn't say that they're like complementary or two sides of the same coin. So ESG is a very broad term, and one aspect of ESG is trying to figure out about your firm, or about evaluating yourself, or trying to have a roadmap as to how exactly you're going to implement, like say, net zero decarbonization. So these could be a few aspects of it, or even better employment conditions. So that is also one aspect of ESG. So in this, what happens is there are different kinds. There are two major broad categories in which you can actually have this roadmap plan. One is this one is framework, and the other one is standards. So framework is wherein the one example is the UN SDG. So you can say that SDG is a subset of ESG, because sustainable development goals, as I said before, it just is a framework. Because if you look at the 17 goals, they say that this is to be done, this is to be done, this is to be done, this is a target. They don't say as to it's not like country specific, it's not like place specific, it's not organization specific. And if a firm wants to figure out where exactly do they stand, it's not possible to do that with the SDG, because it's more qualitative, it's not quantitative. So firms would really be interested in knowing as to where exactly would they be standing, and investors would be interested in knowing numbers. So in that case, you have something called as standards, which are actually a bit more advanced version, to put it very simply, of frameworks, wherein, like, for example, you have GRI. So these standards actually they are country specific, and they actually have like some kind of a rating or ranking assigned to figure out where exactly you stand and how exactly you can go forward. Because using these ratings and rankings, you can actually see or develop your next plan of action as to where exactly you go forward. And like your one example of a standard is also SASB, which is basically for it quantifies everything into numbers. And I mean, it's of interest to investors definitely because they are interested in numbers. They want to see what is the investment, what is the return, and for that, so this is one aspect of standard. On the other hand, SDG is it comes under frameworks, which is something just a qualitative assessment of what exactly needs to be done. And all these come under the umbrella of ESG. So that's exactly how it is. So in simple, to put it or to conclude it or to put it in a nutshell, SDG is like a subset of ESG. That's how I would say.
Okay. So now, how can companies balance the need of innovation and sustainable technologies with challenges of scalability and cost effectiveness?
Okay. So first of all, innovation by itself is it's a very challenging process because first of all you need to have an idea, and then after that it goes through a lot of steps, trial and errors, and then later on it's whether or not it's going to succeed. That itself is like $1 billion question to a lot of people. So it's like even if you look at even very good multinationals which are more focused on the product, especially like say in the aerospace or in the automotive industry, they don't have their own R&Ds. What they do is they outsource it to academic partners because that's a very easy way to actually get in a lot of ideas, and it also gives an incentive for like say students or professors who are working there to actually work on research. And then it's they get the academic institution, they benefit because first of all they have labs which are probably they're just being used by students as well when they have workshops or something like that, and otherwise they're just lying empty. And then also one of the important features for academic institutions is that they have to have like say some kind of research output, and only based on that they actually get some kind of a good ranking with all these university rankings and everything. So in a way it's a win-win. So what can be done, especially in the context of innovation, when you are actually trying to do something like sustainability, wherein first of all, innovation by itself, as I said, is it's definitely for firms wouldn't like to do it themselves because it's going to be very capital intensive. And that too, when you're talking about innovation and sustainability all put in together, the best thing or the best way, especially when it comes to cost effectiveness, is have an outsourcing partner, especially like say an academic institution would be the best place because they have all the facilities in place. It's a win-win situation because they also benefit, and you don't have and there's no a big expectation from them that you have to like pay your employees, or it's then after that trial error. There's nothing of that sort because it can all be done because they have a lab, they have everything in place, they have all the infrastructure, and they have the resources there. So just try to do that. And if it's if there is something appealing, or if you have something like say a patent or some kind of an idea, because it could just be a research, if it's like more of an advisory or a consulting kind of thing you're doing, then it would just be like a kind of a management research problem. And if someone has a good solution to it, just take it and see as to whether it's you can do your own market research and find out as to whether it's going to give you the returns you want. And if it's there, it's like you can just take it and go forward with that. And in this way, it's you actually don't end up losing a lot of money doing an R&D and finding out what is going to work, what is not going to work, and doing all the trial and error yourself. So that's one thing. And the second thing in terms of scalability is coming back to the brand value, which I said. So maybe at this point of time, it's just in the metropolis that when you're actually talking about innovations, especially sustainable, like when we're also trying to factor in sustainability, it might be of interest to few groups at this moment, especially in the metropolis. But of course, you also have an international market wherein you can have a branding advantage and also a cost advantage by taking these kind of approaches. So in that way, it's it gives you an incentive to position yourself there as well in the international market because let's say first of all, even in terms of purchasing power, if you have like a high GDP per capita country, like say for example, so it becomes quite easy for them to actually have something of value, and that too at a comparatively good pricing. So in that way, it's it's a scalability advantage for the firm here. So that's a major advantage. And also in the other developing nations also, there are groups which are taking an active interest in more of sustainability, especially the youngsters. So it's like even for them, it's like that this might be a lucrative proposition. So in that way, it's like you have a scope for international expansion when we're talking about in terms of scalability, sustainability, and innovation. Yes, definitely, it's possible.
Okay, great. So now, how decarbonization and net zero strategy of companies help the environment in a positive way? Please state your experience through various projects on the topic.
Okay. So yeah, so one project which I happened to work was with Airbus, and they were quite ambitious in this regard. So it's like I mean an idea which I mean it's like when we first heard of it, I think it's like we're totally taken back by surprise that something of they would have thought on these grounds. So what they said was we want to go net zero by like say a certain point of time, and what we want we were a group, and they said that what we want you to do is why don't you come up with a proposal in which you would the entire avionics system which we have, we want to have it replaced by biomaterials. And the reason they said that was because um, if you look at like say an Airbus A380 aircraft, it the just the wires which it has inside, it's the largest civilian aircraft the aerospace industry has to offer, and the wiring is like approximately in the order of kilometers. I think that if I'm to say correctly, it's 7 to 8 kilometers just electrical wire. And once the aircraft is used, it's like what happens to that wiring, because we know it's made of plastic metal. So 8 kilometers, just like that line, is it's like it's just massive scrap for them, and it's not something that they can actually get rid of that easily. So they said, why not have it like full biomaterials based? So this was one of the projects they had. Like this was one of their net zero targets, that we'll have our entire avionics system which will be made of biomaterials, and there exactly we actually came up with an idea of having it replaced by say more of biomaterials, like that's more into say more of like cable bacteria. Like I mean, it's more of on the biological side, so cable bacteria or biosensors, something of that. And we actually came across a proposal like that, and we happened to give it to them. So in
Next question to you is how decarbonization and net zero strategy of companies help the environment in a positive way. Please state your experience through various projects on the topic.
Yeah, sure. So one of the projects which I did was with Airbus, and they had kind of an issue that they wanted to go net zero by 2050. And if you look at the entire avionics system within an aircraft, it has approximately the wiring system there is like in the order of kilometers. To just give an example, the Airbus A380, which is the largest civilian passenger aircraft. So it's like just the wires, which is made of plastic and metal, runs in the order of kilometers. So once that aircraft is scrapped, it becomes like a liability for them and also for the environment, because if firm wants to go net zero, and when you talking about decarbonization, literally having kilometers of scraps is there is it's not something very positive sounding. And even in terms of emissions, if I have to talk about aircrafts are one of the major sources of like CO2 emissions. So there exactly is one place where decarbonization comes in. So regarding this, we actually got a proposal, or we got a project from them that why don't you just propose a solution to actually make sure that the avionics system within aircrafts is shifted, move to something more sustainable. So we actually made a proposal for actually having their entire avionics system being replaced by biomaterials. So that's cable bacteria and biosensors. So that would actually save them quite a lot, in terms of their issues with like scrapping of the aircraft in the end. And it also gives them a positive brand image. And when talking about like the aviation industry as such, that has become like a new market standard for them. Like the major competitor for Airbus is Boeing. So when Boeing launched its most recent one, it's like the 787 Dreamliner, they call it as. So the unique selling point in that is that it's made totally of sustainable materials, and it's much more fuel efficient than its predecessors. So that has become like a new state of the art kind of thing. When it's like and it's like what they say is that it's the first step towards their net zero and decarbonization strategy. And similarly, like the major competitor Airbus has also come up with the same thing. So they have the new A350, and if you look at net zero decarbonization, these has been actually quite actively being factored in their business models. So in a way, that's exactly how they are actually creating a positive image that that they have been adopting net zero strategies, and in a way, it's also giving them a lot of strategies. And it's very clear because they're using this as a selling point as well, which means that it's being received positively by the world, by the customers, and by people at large. So in that aspect, it's like when the industry standard itself has become sustainability, then in that case, it's like any strategy which actually is in the direction of decarbonization and net zero is going to give positive yields, because it's going to be perceived like in a very positive sense. And the examples as I quoted.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So now we move to the next question. How life cycle assessment of a product helps in sustainability, and how companies can be more ethical by conducting a life cycle assessment? What are your legal implications of the same in India?
Sure.
What are the legal
So
implications?
yeah, sure. So when we're talking about life cycle assessment, so it's like every like especially in the product form, if you look at, they'll have like an entire product life cycle, which starts right from like the ideation stage to R&D to development, and then to production, and then to like the inbound, outbound logistics, suppliers, etc. And they have like a whole product life cycle. So one advantage with LCA is that you can actually identify problems with respect to within the product life cycle as to where exactly the problems lie. So it gives you like a large picture from which you can actually choose in which direction you would like to proceed. So that's one of the advantages that within the life cycle, based on your priorities, you actually have uh, like a way to actually proceed further and see as to where exactly you want to invest, given the market situation, the market conditions, or even the financial situation. So that comes in handy. And the second important thing I would say is that, especially, it's like one thing you can definitely do with an LCA is that you can validate your sustainability claims. So the problem is like when a company says that they're going net zero, or like we are doing something sustainable, the problem is if you are not able to prove it, then in that case you have like a negative brand image, which actually you'll have to carry for the probably for the rest of your entire like I mean like when you place in the market, and if you have this kind of an image, then it's going to reflect value on you as an organization. Like just to give an example of like even in the like from a legal perspective, like the Volkswagen scam is an example of greenwashing, you can say. So wherein like Volkswagen made a claim that the software emissions is like to a certain level, but then they found out that it's actually not the case, and it was 40 times more. And in, especially in the USA, they face a lot of legal charges. But of course, they came out of it because they're a big brand name, so it's easy for them to mitigate all these. But even if you look at from an Indian perspective, even like if sustainability norms are not there, but still from a legal point of view, if you get involved in negative advertising, then it can become a legal scandal in a way. So in that way, it's like an LCA comes in handy because you actually have like a research based system through which you can say that, okay, fine, this is my sustainability claim and this is exactly how I reached it. So it's like it can be used as a way to validate your findings. Otherwise, it's like it becomes a very hard thing when people start questioning your credibility, or like an organization's credibility, and it becomes like how do I prove it then? And you might actually end up in a legal scandal or even negative brand imaging. So in that way, an LCA comes in handy.
Precisely. Very nicely said. So now we come to the next question, the importance of net zero communities and what steps should be taken by the government in facilitating the building of the same.
Sure. So I think when it comes to the net zero approach, when we're talking about this country, like the major things which we'll have to take into consideration is the population, and the major sources. If you look at like right from the sustainability perspective, energy and transportation. It's not just here, but everywhere. It's like that's exactly where all the issues started. And for transportation, if you look at the e-vehicles, which is coming up, so that is actually picking up momentum slowly. But of course, it has something to do directly with customers, so it's not advisable, or it's like not very practical at this moment to start pushing in from the side of the government, at least to like say that you have to move more towards e-vehicles and stuff. So that's probably not. But then one good thing which we can observe is like the energy mix. It's moving more towards the renewables, so that has been actively visible, I would say. And then that is actually kind of an advantage as well, because when people are using electricity, as I said before, I mean, like when they're using electric power, like no one is going to ask what's the source. As long as it fits the bill, it's like people are quite happy with it. So in that way, there is an advantage that actually, like, if energy investors and the government, if there are active, like, investment schemes, especially as is the case in Europe, that you have concepts like, say feed-in tariffs, feed-in premiums. So it gives energy investors actually an incentive when they start investing in renewable energy. So since it's a cash-based incentive scheme, they also get this advantage that it's not like a big financial burden for them. So in that is one way in which like Europe is actually trying to transition more on the sustainability side, especially in terms of energy. And similarly, that's one of the things, when it comes to policies, if there is some incentive given from the side of the government, especially to actually transition more towards, like, at least on the energy side, then it can still be, like, a huge saver. And in like in this net zero, like with like for the net zero targets, and that would also, like, inadvertently start you can actually start a community, because first of all, we have a solar alliance, which basically is, like, one of the, like, say, byproducts of net zero. So in that way, it's like, a community by itself can be started. And another thing which is, like, also practically possible but not happening at this moment is, there is also something called as ocean thermal energy conversion. So that is like, it is supposed to be in advanced. It is in the advanced R&D stage at this moment, and there is research going on in Japan, Hawaii, wherein you can use the temperature difference between, like, the Earth's, like, the ocean surface and the temperature, like, just at the ocean bed. There is a huge temperature difference, and that can be used to generate electricity. And we have an advantage that, it's like, the coastline is, we have such a huge coastline, and also, given that we are in the tropical zone, if the government can push R&D in that direction, it can actually reap a lot of benefits, and it's like a very reliable source of power as well, compared to, like, say, because solar and wind is, like, it's not entirely reliable, especially when you're considering 1.4 billion population, because you can never predict when the sun, like, when you actually will have, like, sunshine, or when it's going to rain, or it's like, when you'll have the expected wind flow. So in that aspect, solar and wind is, like, not that effective for, like, 1.4 billion people. But ocean thermal energy conversion, which was actually being researched by National Institute of Ocean Technology in India as well, but due to some reasons, it did not pick up momentum. But if that could be capitalized, I think the estimates say that it has the potential to at least produce electricity in a renewable way, which is 5 times the world's global demand. So that's exactly the potential which the country carries. And if investments are pushed in that direction, then of course there is always a chance to proceed further in this direction. But like, yeah, it's not active at the moment, but in the future there are chances.
Yeah, wonderful. Rightly said. So now we move to the last question, but not the least. When we talk about the young entrepreneurs, what is your message to them and how they can contribute towards sustainable Bharat?
Okay, so yeah, that's nice. This was a question, actually, so to speak. So I mean, I always say that charity actually begins at home. So it's like, whenever we're talking about sustainability, and if you're talking about sustainable Bharat, the first thing is, like, figuring out what we can do ourselves. Like, of course, it's like, it doesn't mean that right at this moment you'll have to go and put a solar panel above your roof. That's not. I mean, that's not what is expected. But definitely, it's like, something which can be observed is, like, segregating waste properly. And even if you, like, say, for example, going to the supermarket, like, yeah, I mean, I'm just selling it, like, not just to an entrepreneur but to an individual itself. Like, if you're just going to a supermarket, like, why don't you, like, you can just take your own bags and go. Then we can save a lot of, like, paper, like extra paper, or even, like, because nowadays there are paper bags or even plastic bags. So
Yes,
it's like, instead of actually using those, if you take your own bags, that itself is going to make, these are small things which can actually make a lot of difference.
true.
And the effect of compounding also is, like, will be clearly visible, because when you actually want sustainability within your organization, the first question before someone would actually try to buy in or accept is that, are you doing that yourself? So it's like, if founders, co-founders, if they actively start doing it within their own little personal sphere. And I mean, it's not just about waste disposal. It could also be, like, when you're actually driving a car, there are ways in which you like even the gear transmissions. There are ways in which gear transmission can be done, which makes the car more fuel efficient, and it reduces carbon dioxide emissions by a significant factor. So this is something which, if you consider doing, and if people are actively seeing you, compounding has a huge power. So it's like, if you're a founder, co-founder, and if people around you, your employees and your stakeholders are observing the fact that you're doing it, one becomes two, two becomes four, four becomes eight, and like how the investment game works. Similarly, this sustainability would work as well,
Yeah,
and soon
true.
we'll figure out that probably a significant amount of people would be soon be willing to switch over. So that's exactly the message which I would like to give, that yes, it all begins at home,
Yeah.
and it's just one step, and it's very small and simple.
Yeah, so small steps can make a difference, rightly said. So
Exactly.
it was really wonderful to have you at our Eco Tech Talk, and the inputs that you gave, they are really good, and I'm sure the viewers will gain through it. Thank you so much.
Likewise, thank you very much for the opportunity. It was indeed a pleasure to be on this platform and express my views. Um, yes, of course. And also, thanks to the entire team for facilitating this.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay.